sharks circling a bigger fish like a wagon train, and they will come in and attack it from all sides like a wagon train, the Indians going around the wagon train in the Western movies, and that's one of their survival techniques. But of course they're swimming in the territory controlled by mum and dad grey reef shark under the protection. So I clearly reckon this is a grey reef shark baby nursery. Hands up if you agree. And finally, just a few words about agonistic behaviour. This is the aggression behaviour in a shark. The thing about sharks that I like to think of is that I do display aggressive behaviour from time to time. I turn into a monster when I'm behind the wheel of a car. I do try hard to control myself, but that's aggression behaviour. It happens for a few small moments once every now and again. I'm sure we all have those little bits of aggression. Same goes for sharks. The stuff we see in the media is agonistic or aggressive behaviour. It's not typical of sharks. Most of the time I've seen sharks, they're just very relaxed, they're very mellow, they're very curious, they're almost friendly. In fact, they are friendly sometimes. They do like to be stroked. They're not any different from your pet dog or your pet cat. Some of them do like a bit of human interaction. But anyway, agonistic behaviour is something you should learn to recognise. How do you tell if a shark is angry? Well, there are a number of things. First of all, the shark is moving very fast. It's very erratic. It does very sudden, sharp turns left to right with hard angles. It will come in very close to you very fast. The whaler sharks in particular might like to come in close to you and charge at you like this one's doing. Now there's a silly story behind this photograph. The dive guide there, who's a brilliant shark feeder and a brilliant, like a New Guinea guy, got brilliant knowledge of the sea. If I was able to, I'd give him a PhD because he's got such incredible knowledge of every part of the sea. He's sitting with his knees on my shoulders, holding a small piece of bait just above my head, right here. And that's how come I got the photograph. I'm shooting with my close-up lens, my macro lens, waiting to get a full face shot of this silver-tip whaler. So it's fun. The shark turned between this point here and the next 1,000th of a second before it hit my face because it's only interested in the food. There's a whole lot more about agonistic behaviour of sharks, but haven't got time here, so I'll just close up here by saying that shark behaviour is something that I like to observe. I've dived with sharks many, many thousands of times, and almost all the times I've dived with sharks, they're very calm, they're very mellow, they're inquisitive, they're almost friendly, but most of all they're beautiful, they're spectacular, and they're just wonderful animals. Are there any questions? By the way, I know exactly who didn't put their hand up to any of my questions. I'll be coming to see you after the talk.
Alright, definitely no questions, guys. Okay, we'll be open for more questions again at the end. If anybody gets a little bit of confidence to come up and ask a question, or you're welcome to come up and chat to us afterwards as well. But for now, we'll move on to our final speaker, Nicola Bynon. So Nicola is Head of Campaigns for the Australian Office of Humane Society International and has spent 2 decades championing protection for wildlife. Her career highlight was securing protection for the great white shark from the trade in its jaws and fins at the UN Convention for International Trade in Endangered Species. Please welcome Nicola.
Thanks everybody and hello. So Humane Society International, we're a charity. We're quite proudly the world's largest animal protection organisation with about 10 million members worldwide. We've been operating in Australia since about 1994 and we've got about 70,000 financial supporters on our books here in Australia and always looking for more. I've been working for HSI since 1998, so that's 20 years now, and through all of that time, a priority campaign for us has been shark conservation. And I don't mind admitting I am absolutely terrified of sharks, but I know that sharks have 100 million reasons more to be terrified of us, because that's the estimate of how many sharks are killed every year around the world. It's a phenomenal number. Now there's about 1,000 species of shark, more than 1,000 species of shark and ray in the world. And on Humane Society International's to-do list is trying to get legal protection for them, systematically, one by one. And as you can imagine, given the PR that sharks have, it's quite a hard task, and it takes a lot of time, takes a lot of scientific research and a lot of legal campaigning and lobbying and advocacy. But this is the table of roughly where we've got to in terms of protecting sharks under Australian legislation, both federal legislation and state and territory legislation, where we've got to protecting sharks at the UN Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species. So that's the big UN convention that negotiates whether we're going to trade in ivory, how about tiger skins, what are the quotas, and so on. So we've managed to get those sharks protected at CITES to have the trade in their jaws or their fins better regulated. And then the last column is the Convention on Migratory Species. It's another UN convention, and that's a convention where governments get together to cooperate with conservation to save species. So we've nominated with governments the species there, and they're starting to get some protection, and governments cooperating together to conserve them. And I should say each of those species nominations was an awful lot of work. At CITES in particular, very, very controversial. Many governments didn't want to give protection to sharks. They wanted to keep that treaty for terrestrial animals, and they didn't want environmental organisations getting involved in fisheries. They wanted to carry on fishing, thank you very much, without any regulation or intervention. But slowly we managed to get there. Governments put the nominations forward, and then there's votes, and you need a 3/4 majority of governments voting to get a species listed. I can remember dancing in the streets of Santiago when we finally got the great white shark listed back in 2004. So 100 million sharks roughly. I mean, it's a very, very crude figure, but that's the rough estimate of sharks killed a year. And these are just some of the threats. So fishing, we've talked about, fishing mainly for the fin trade. That's still a huge driver of the kill of sharks every year. And also the meat trade. When you eat fish and chips, very often the flake in your fish and chips is shark. And bycatch as well. So when the tuna industry is putting out long lines to catch tuna, sharks are very often caught on those long lines as well. Tens and tens of thousands of them. And I should have added plastics to that list because, I mean, it is the issue of the moment, and we just saw that video evidence of just how much damage plastics are doing to sharks. But the top threat that I wanted to talk about today was our deliberate culling of sharks because we are so scared of them. And we have culling programs in Australia for sharks, in New South Wales and Queensland. WA have taken a non-lethal policy, but in Queensland we're catching sharks in shark nets, and we're catching sharks on drum lines in the Great Barrier Reef. There's 173 drum lines in the Great Barrier Reef which are designed to kill sharks in that World Heritage Area. And in New South Wales we have shark nets as well which are killing sharks. In fact, just hot off the press, or perhaps I should say hot off the nets, the government released the statistics just 2 days ago of the marine wildlife killed in the shark nets along the beaches from Wollongong to Newcastle. And this is the number of animals that were killed, the death toll in the shark nets for the 2017-2018 summer season. So they caught 403 animals in total, and 339 of those animals were not target species. They were harmless animals. 223 of the animals caught in those nets were killed. And there's the list of the animals killed. I put the grey nose sharks at the top of the list because they are critically endangered. And it's thought that there's so few grey nose sharks now that they find it difficult to find a mate. The numbers are really low, so when you take 10 grey nurse out of the East Coast population, that's really serious to be doing that and to be doing it year after year. 77 smooth hammerheads, 3 great hammerheads. Great hammerheads are classified internationally as endangered. 4 dolphins, 3 Indo-Pacific dolphins, 14 great white sharks. Now, of course, the great white is a target species. That's what they're aiming to catch and kill in those nets. But they're also a threatened species. They're listed as vulnerable to extinction. The government has an obligation to protect, under law, to protect that species, and yet we have a program that's deliberately killing them. 7 green turtles, 2 hawksbill turtles, and 1 olive ridley. 31 rays, and 1 of those lovely Port Jackson sharks we saw pictures of earlier. Now, some people will often ask me, particularly when I'm talking to shock jocks on the radio, so do you care more about sharks than you care about humans? And no, of course we don't. We care about protecting humans, but this isn't the way to do it. This isn't actually protecting humans from sharks. It's a myth to think that the shark nets are some kind of barrier to keep swimmers and surfers safe at the beach. In fact, the statistics show that a lot of the sharks caught in those nets are caught going out from the beach. They've already been in, had a look at us, decided they're not interested, and they're on their way out when they get killed. Also, while shark attacks are very rare, there have been 33 shark encounters at netted beaches, so the nets are not preventing those incidents from occurring. That's in New South Wales. We've got much more sophisticated ways now of protecting ourselves from the very rare risk of a shark bite. We've got aerial surveillance that can be used, light aircrafts, helicopters, drones, and much better use of social media now. So if people are regularly feeling that they're putting themselves at risk, surfers that go out every day and they want to protect themselves, they can sign up for apps where you can be advised of increased shark activity. Say there's a school of bait fish at the beach you want to surf at, well, maybe it's not such a good idea to go this morning, or there's a whale carcass washed up, so there's likely to be more sharks attracted to the beach. We can use that technology to make people much better informed about the risks. And also, people can take personal responsibility with shark deterrent devices that you can strap onto your legs. And I'm sure that sort of technology is going to be get better and better with time and demand. So we say that this isn't the way of dealing with the problem, because there's an awful lot of marine wildlife getting killed in those nets and also on the drum lines. So we, time and time again, we're asking the government to rethink it. And I mentioned the 173 drum lines in the Great Barrier Reef. We're actually taking that program to court, and we'll have a hearing in January. We're challenging the Great Barrier Reef Marine Park Authority's decision to issue a permit for those 173 drum lines for 10 years to be killing. At the time it was 26 species of shark. Now fortunately, through the court case, they've reduced that number to 19 target species, but still most of those target species are perfectly harmless and not responsible for unprovoked attacks on humans. So we hope we can get some change through the courts, because it's proved very frustrating trying to get change from the government. And And I mentioned before that I'm terrified of sharks, but just to conclude, I would say that I'm much, much more terrified of an ocean without them.
Thank you very much, Nicola. Does anybody have any questions for Nicola? Yep. Sorry, I'll bring the mic over.
Have we actually managed to stop or made it illegal for finning in Australia?
It's complicated. So you're not allowed to fin a shark and chuck its body back into the sea. So finning and discarding is illegal in most jurisdictions in Australia. But how that's policed is not effective in all jurisdictions. So for example, in Queensland, you only have to land your shark with the fin attached once 75% of your shark quota has been fulfilled. So we say that that's just not good enough. I mean, if you, in Europe, in the United States, in many other countries around the world, if you're catching sharks, you have to land them whole with the fin still attached. So Queensland's pretty backwards when it comes to how they're managing their shark fishery. And you still can catch sharks for their fins, and we are exporting shark fin to Asia in quite large, significant quantities, including from fisheries on the Great Barrier Reef.
Any other questions?
Thank you. Just a couple of questions. Well, first of all, thank you very much. So the first question is about fishing communities in Costa Rica, Guatemala, Mexico, that because of overfishing or because of the money that is on shark finning, they see themselves on just basically going for sharks. So what could be, in your opinion, a good solution for these communities to stop fishing for sharks? So that would be the first one. And the second one is also related to sharks being fished for their meat. But then obviously the meat doesn't get sold as shark meat, but it gets sold as tintorera or any kind of all the other secondary names. So I'm not sure what would be the opinion of the panel on that.
So I think there are many countries now who are realizing that sharks are much more valuable alive to the economy than they are dead. And we're at a dive expo, so that it's easy to realize why. And if we look to our Pacific neighbors, about 10 countries now, I forget the last count, but about 10 countries have completely prohibited shark fishing in their waters. So their waters are now sanctuaries for sharks. So in Australia, we are falling behind our Pacific neighbours. And I think, of course, it's difficult